In fact, let's take you to the to our guest, Father O'Connor, who is on the line. Father O'Connor, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us as we take a look at the news just in live on our screen. We can see that crowds have been waiting for smoke from the Sistine Chapel. We've just seen black smoke. Talk to us about the significance as we try and make sense and, of course, wait to see if a new pope will be elected. Of course, it's been said that it's unlikely to happen on the first day of voting.
Good evening, viewers. Yes, the black smoke indicates that there was no candidate in the elections who received 2/3 of the votes. To be elected pope, you need a 2/3 majority. And historically, this was, in a sense, the way that it was signaled to the people. Black smoke indicates that the vote this evening was inconclusive. And white smoke would have indicated that a new pope had been elected. It would be very, very unlikely that, given the diversity, given the context, that the cardinals would have been able to elect a new pope this evening on the first round of ballots.
133 red-robed cardinals from around the world filled into the Sistine Chapel, and of course the doors were closed, and those behind the doors were set to stay there for the course until a decision has been made. What is the conclave voting process like? Talk us through what's expected and what's happening behind those closed doors. Okay, I see we may have lost Father Hugh O'Connor, but of course breaking news just in: black smoke rises from the Sistine Chapel as more than 30,000 people are gathered around in Vatican Square for a glimpse of the smoke, and it's now emanated from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel following the official start of the Papal Conclave. Black smoke, as you've heard from Father Hugh O'Connor, indicating that a pope has not yet been selected. White smoke, on the other hand, would have signified that one of the 133 cardinals has secured 2/3 of the votes to become the next pope. And of course, the likelihood, listening to what Father Hugh O'Connor said there, that it's unlikely that a new pope will be elected on the first day of voting. And the process, of course, may be shrouded in secrecy, but we're learning that it is a straightforward process. Each conclave member writing his choice on a paper ballot slip and folding it once in half, and then carrying it aloft between the two fingers as he walks to the altar, and then he slips it into the slip is then deposited into a special urn used only for the balloting process. So conclave members are instructed to write their votes as far as possible in handwriting that cannot be identified as his, to ensure that the voting process remains anonymous. So the process there, and any conclave member who cannot make it in person to the Sistine Chapel due to illness or cannot cast his ballot from his room in the area, those ballots are then placed in a lockbox and carried to the Sistine Chapel. So there you have it, the news just in, as the first conclave ballot has taken place. I understand we have Father Hugh Connor who's back. Father Hugh Connor, as we look at the breaking news on our screen, the black smoke rising from the Sistine Chapel, we know, as you've just mentioned, that no pope has been chosen as yet. As the electors vote to select the next leader of the world's 1.4 billion Catholics, and soon after, if we had seen white smoke, perhaps let's talk about what the process would have been. I mean, you've spoken about how it's unlikely that this process would happen on day one. How long is it expected to last, as the world is watching to see whether the smoke is black or white?
This is why the cardinals go into conclave, so that they have the freedom, without any pressure from us who are watching and waiting, to vote in freedom and according to their conscience. What would happen if there was a new pope elected? The pope would then receive the greetings and the obedience of the cardinals there present. He would then be taken to a small room on the side of the Sistine Chapel. It's called the Room of Tears, because you suddenly realize what has actually happened to you in all of this. He would then be vested in the papal vestments, the white vestments. From there, he would be taken to the balcony of St. Peter's, where he would then be announced to the world. We have a pope. And it will be on that balcony that we would see who it is, and also he will reveal the name that he chooses to be known by. And usually when they choose a name of someone that they wish to emulate in their lives. Somebody that they respect. And so very often you get the repeat of a papal name. Pope Francis was the first to take Francis, so he was actually Francis the first, really. But, because he was the only one and the first, we just called him Pope Francis.
As you talk about the choice, I mean, the stakes are pretty high, aren't they? The cardinal electors will need to make this choice. It's either they select a pontiff who will follow in the footsteps of Pope Francis, or one who will guide the Catholic Church down a more traditional path. What are your thoughts around that?
Look, I think, I personally think that Pope Francis was pretty traditional. He did not change any of the doctrine or the teaching of the Church. But what he did do is he brought the fullness of his humanity to the papacy, and he allowed his own personality to be expressed. And so we see that in his actions and in his words, he was very pastoral. He wanted to meet people where they were at. Before you throw rules and regulations and must nots and don'ts and do's, meet people where they're at. Meet one human being with another human being. And I think this was his real gift. Somebody was saying that when you go and look at his tomb in Santa Maria Maggiore, it is just a flat slab of marble with the words Franciscus written on it. Very simple, very straightforward, nothing complicated. So I think that the cardinals in their vote will be looking for somebody who will continue to show the human face of God through the Church, through the papacy, to our world today.
This week's conclave is being described as the most diverse in history, with cardinals coming from all over the world to elect the next pope. Let's talk a little bit about the composition. 133 cardinals. I mean, how do we explain this? Because it's history in the making.
Look, it is the largest conclave in history. Each pope has the opportunity of making, making cardinals. It's an honorific title. And Pope Francis, in his years as Pope, has made a number of appointments and has increased the size of the College of Cardinals. We need to also realize that any cardinal over the age of 80 cannot vote in the conclave. So when we see processions of cardinals like in St. Peter's, we often are also seeing those who are over 80 and who have either come to Rome or who are in Rome for the Pope Francis's funeral and are now waiting for the election of the new Pope. So the diversity, I think, adds a richness to the face of the College of Cardinals. It also brings a number of different trends from the margins. It speaks into the issues that are facing the world, right across the world, not just one area of the world. And so one can expect that this conclave may take a little longer than the previous ones, especially more than the one where Cardinal Ratzinger was elected Pope, came as Pope Benedict XVI. But I think that should not, worry us.
Mm-hmm.
I think the most important thing is the process, and the process of discerning who the cardinals gathered there feel can lead the church. And, leadership is both about keeping tradition, but also moving forward with the times. When the cardinals elected Pope John the 23rd, they elected an old man. They did not expect him to do anything radical. They expected everything just to continue along the same lines. And what does he do? He calls the Second Vatican Council. So, tremendous surprise. I think this is what this moment is. It is a moment of surprise.
Yeah, a moment of surprise indeed, because it's shrouded in a lot of secrecy. We saw the 133 cardinals earlier on lining up to take an oath to ensure the secrecy of the conclave to elect the next leader of the Roman Catholic Church. Why is it so important that, I also understand that the cell phones of the cardinals were taken away to ensure that there is that level of secrecy?
Well, I think let's have a look. I'm just going to quickly jump in with something simple.
Yeah.
When we go to vote in elections, national, provincial, we are not allowed to take pictures of our ballot papers. We go into a secluded box where we can make our own mark, what we believe, without anybody interfering with us. So I think the element of secrecy is linked with the element of freedom, and that each cardinal votes according to what he thinks best and according to his conscience. Now, he does not reveal who he has voted for, and also this has a very simple human element. How would one feel if one was the sort of known to the world as the failed pope, the one who didn't get enough votes? And then that would also create a whole lot of other pressures. Oh, well, if you were pope, what would you have done? So it really is to protect the individuals, to allow them to move back into their jobs, into their positions, back to their dioceses in freedom. And only those 133 people know who came close, how many votes each person got, and each person who voted knows how they voted. So it's a tremendous, I think I've been thinking quite often about it today. It's a tremendous responsibility that you carry, and the secrecy adds to a certain weightiness to your decision. The secrecy also prevents unnecessary manipulation of opinions, people being swung from left to right. It also prevents fake news being spread around, and it leaves the cardinals free to make their decision. So they really are in a giant voting booth at the moment, just like you and I would be when we go to vote.
The majority of the cardinals are coming from Europe, including 17 electors from Italy, 5 from Spain and 5 from France. I also understand South Africa has a representative there. Does that composition influence which way this vote could sway?
I think there are far more cardinals from outside of Europe in this present conclave. If you think about it, throughout the centuries, the church was largely concentrated in Europe, so therefore it made perfect sense that you got a European and primarily Italian Pope. But as the College of Cardinals has been expanded, become more diversified, more universalized, so it has, what can I say, watered down any single European bloc. So, in the past, in history, there were all sorts of political shenanigans going on around the election of the Pope. And sometimes it reached the point of ridiculousness. No one could agree, and people were voting on blocks and all sorts of things. And that, in a sense, is part of history. And it shows that the church continues no matter who gets elected. But while they play an important role, an important part of in leadership in the church is bigger. God's Spirit is greater. So I think one of the things that really irks us as modern people is that there are things that we don't know or can't get to know. The conclave is one of those things. What happens in the Sistine Chapel as the cardinals vote, as they gather under Michelangelo's Last Judgment, realizing that they're making a serious decision here, it's frustrating. We'd like to know. We'd like to be a fly on the wall.
Yes, of course.
And the process keeps out all such flies, drones, cell phones, spyware. So, I think it's more of a frustration, the secrecy, and I think we make too much out of it.
Yeah. In fact, as you talk about how guarded this process is, technicians, I understand, also ensured that there are no secretly installed bugs or similar devices inside the Sistine Chapel or adjacent areas to ensure that, we don't see a time of fake news. You've also indicated that this process could take a lot longer than for, say, previous processes because of the large number of cardinals, 133 to be exact. How long could it be before they come to a conclusion?
Look, your guess is as good as mine. We don't know what happened today. We don't know if there's a clear front runner or if there were, let's say 20 candidates voted for, whether you got one vote or whether you got 50 votes, if you know what I mean. We just don't know that. What we do have is that in the rules of the conclave, there are 21 votes. And after 21 votes, there is a final vote between the two leading candidates. And this is done in order to bring the conclave to a conclusion and to prevent what was once in history the longest conclave, which ran on for 3 years. But, that is a different time and a different period. But, this is the oldest process of the election of a head of state in the entire world. Because they're not only electing the Pope, who is the Bishop of Rome, so they're electing a new Bishop of Rome, but they're also electing the head of the Vatican State. So there are two things to consider. You've got a spiritual dimension as well as an administrative dimension. So, in terms of administration, the church in the modern era has really streamlined its processes. And, my own gut feeling or something is that things for the cardinals should be clarified, in a sense, by tomorrow evening. They will have done 2 votes in the morning and 2 votes in the afternoon. And if we have black smoke at all of those, we then can expect that there is a process and we're moving forward. So black smoke does not necessarily mean that nothing's happening. It just means that somebody hasn't got 2/3 majority.
So as far as I understand, any baptized Catholic male is eligible to take Pope Francis's place. But of course, it's not as simple as that. In terms of criteria and eligibility, what are they looking out for?
Look, while any baptized male could be elected Pope, and he would then have to be ordained a bishop because he is Bishop of Rome, I think the qualities that people are looking for are those of leadership, those of courage, those of deep faith. Somebody with a heart for the world and for others. Somebody who has, and I think the role of the papacy is being incredibly important in these latter days is somebody who can speak truth to power. Yes, popes are flawed. Pope Francis was flawed. Each of the popes has got his own personality. Each of them carries with him strengths and weaknesses. But I think what one's looking really is for a man who is able to be a father and a shepherd, and who is able to speak to all people of goodwill and be heard by those who don't really want to hear what he has to say. Nobody's ever going to agree with everything that the Pope says or does, not outside the church and certainly not within the church. But within the church, there is the obligation that we have as Catholics to listen and to follow the leadership and the guidance of the Holy Father.
Very well. Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening there, wrapping up that conversation with Secretary General of the Southern African Catholic Bishops' Conference, Father Hugh O'Connor, really just expanding on the news just in. Black smoke emerging from the Sistine Chapel, indicating that a pope has not yet been selected.